Ladies and gentlemen, the next hour is now dedicated to a panel session on sharing a vision for ICT innovation. That means the topic of our co-summit. May I please ask now the panelists and the moderator to the stage, Khalil Rouhana from the European Commission, Director for Components and Systems, Okan Kara, the Chairman of the Eureka High-Level Group, Heinrich Demkes from ERDS and Board Member of Artemis, Francis Chutin, Scientific Vice President of Cap Digital and Scientific Director of the Institute Min Telecom, and last but not least, Zeynep Sarilar, CTO and co-founder of Mobilera, and since today, board member of ITEA. And the moderator of this panel is our old friend, a young friend, but a friend in a long time, Emil Arz, who actively participated for a long time in ITEA and Artemis. Today, Emil is Professor of Computing Science and Vice Dean at Eindhoven University of Technology. Emil, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Rudolf. It's a pleasure for me, ladies and gentlemen, to be here and to moderate a session on my personal topic that I especially like, and that is about the future. So what we will be doing today is we will look at what has happened a little, we will look at what will be ahead, and we at least will try to involve you in some way in the discussion. So I hope that you bear with us. I also think it's a very special place here at La Défense to be here, because if you have the time, ladies and gentlemen, to go outside, especially when it is dark, maybe at the end of the day, you will see an image of a city, of a municipality that was already casted in movies like 2001 Space Odyssey by Kubrick, but also in Total Recall and Minority Report, as a world of the future. And maybe you don't notice it, but you are living in that world. With screens of a size as large, as big as a building, with colored lighting, with access to computing everywhere. And you see the young people moving around here, and they all wear their smartphones. And they all use it to stay connected to their beloved. There was once a panel with a young philosopher from Finland, and he made this remarkable statement, gentlemen and the lady, you have to live up to that. He just simply said, what ICT brought me is the opportunity to tell my lady friend that I love her at any time and at any place and at any moment I want to do that. And that's interesting, because that has to do with happiness. And I'm so very glad that Rudolf and his team decided to have happiness as the fifth theme. So let's move on a little, ladies and gentlemen. So we have this very interesting high-level vision jointly produced by ITEA and Artemis for the year 2030, and their objective is to touch the lives of 8 billion people. That means virtually everybody on this globe. But they want also to do that with radically different businesses to indeed be able to reach those persons. And finally, they are aware of the fact that all these new changes have to match the resource requirements of the single Earth as a footprint. That's very important. So they have singled out these 7 changes, as they call it, and well, many of you will be involved in other developments, and indeed, you will recognize it. There is hardly anything else to mention that is relevant and is not on this list. So we can at least agree upon the fact that we touch on the most important things that make us tick. But life is interesting, ladies and gentlemen, and changes, they go very fast. Many of us, you and I, here in the audience, still recall the point in time when the internet was introduced. We use email, and will be all accused by our children within less than 5 years with sentences in which they complain to their friends, my dad still sends email, because that will be an outdated medium. So it shows, it reflects how fast developments go. And here you see a list of visions we had some 12 years ago. It was a very pronounced exercise in Europe. It were the 4 ISTAC visions, and if you read through them, the scenarios as we use them were at that point in time the way we handled these type of issues. So they were named after personas. Maria was one, Demetrius was one, Carmen, and Annette and Solomon. And what is interesting to notice is the following one. If you look at what the scenario of Maria was, it's a fast businesswoman. She travels around the world. She carries with her a device. It's called a PDA. We didn't know a damn what it would mean at that point in time, but it would help her to make arrangements of her appointments at any point in time and any place. It would be context dependent, and you know, Maria is sitting in our panel. She's called Zainab. It's the businesswoman who really is a role model of very many young people, and the reason why I tell you this is that we have achieved this scenario. This scenario, ladies and gentlemen, has become true. With respect to the other 3, there are doubts, especially the 4th one. With respect to education, we are lagging behind. And my personal opinion is that the reason that we lag behind is that no one is willing to put money into education. It's different from the first one, where there are these business models. I have seen prototypes of an iPad already within Philips more than 12 years ago. I've seen similar prototypes at Siemens. What we all know is that the true breakthrough was done by another company. And that brings me to the last slide before we go and open the discussion. Many of the things that we talk about really have to do with leadership. And I think the keynote by Mr. Berton expressed that in a very excellent way. It was the combination of dedication, leadership, and happiness. So he really was a role model for us there. And I think that we have 5 pronounced leaders sitting in our panel. And let's have a discussion with them. So I would like to go over to my team and start the discussion, but not before we introduce them to you one by one. So first, there is Heinrich Demkes. He is a VP at Cassidian, a system and software engineer. He heads the entire department that has to deal with this subject. He is educated as an intellectual, I'm almost sure, but as an electrical engineer from the universities in Aachen and Duisburg. He has served on several boards. He's also still a part-time professor at Ulm University. So you are the man to have here, or at least to start with. So let's ask him a personal question. So my question to you, Heinrich, would be, looking back over the past 10 years, and you are an experienced leader, which ICT innovation didn't you anticipate at all?
Yeah, thank you for this challenging question. Looking back, a lot of the bare technological developments, like for instance a PDA or iPad or so, one could assume and anticipate. But what I did not anticipate is the social media. These social networking among people not leading directly to something that is productive or so in the common traditional sense. Yep. And this is showing that this is coming up with a new generation. So it is typical that my kids are using that. They are a member of several social networks, but me, I'm very, very skeptical.
Yep. But is there a reason why? So are you on LinkedIn, for instance, or Facebook? Can we link?
To be honest, I'm in no social network.
All right.
And this is due to the fact that I'm very, very skeptical about the privacy of these networks. Right. And some of this skepticism is confirmed at the moment, but I'm sure it will take just some more time and I will join one of these networks.
That's interesting. So maybe we could get back to the security and trust issue later in the discussion.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Heinrich. So Francis Jutland, ladies and gentlemen, Scientific Director of the Institut Mines Telecom. That's a very interesting combination. Yeah. So Mines and Telecom. Yeah. So it is, I think, where you meet is especially at the edge of energy and green ICT, I suppose.
Yes.
Yep, very good. You are also the Scientific Director of France Telecom. You have run, are you no longer, I take it from your body language?
4 years.
Oh,
4 years.
Okay, so that was something you did in the past, very good. Yeah. So you moved on, very good. Let me ask you a personal question here also. So the telecom providers, for a very long time, used a business model that was based on selling TICs to clients. Yeah. Will that business model prevail in the decade to come?
Okay, so it's a difficult question, so I'm thinking of finding a way not to answer to it. So the first question is, what is the telecom providers today? Is there pure players providers or not, or they sell services? Another way to think of the question is the big fight on the value chain between service vendors and telecom providers. And there's another interesting path to explore is how to put back value in the network, okay? And I think it's pretty interesting because there's a lot of things to do to put value in the networks in different ways. One way could be that we call Internet of Things, because there's a lot of new, obviously, for sure we need to invest, but there's a lot of value in this terminal part of the network with the Internet of Things or cyber physics and so forth. So, to my opinion, things are not simple. It's going to depend on the way telecom providers are going to find to put back value into the core of the network and into the extremity of the network with, let's say, Internet of Things.
But I take it from your answer that you are still more or less convinced that the end user will pay for the game. And not anyone in between who is a kind of stakeholder and has some purpose.
Yeah. I think it is not simple because when with innovation and big disruption, there's always a new kind of business between information processing, between communication, between content. And I think in the long term, it's a real work to organize very efficient telecom networks. So I think after this, we are going to tell some word about that. We are deep in a transition, and you can really know what is going to become the work into this transition. Yep. So I think there's a potential for telecom providers to get back value into the network.
Right. Very good. Thank you very much. We will get back to that question or the issue of the transition later, I assume. Well, I already more or less, ladies and gentlemen, introduced Zeynep Sarila. She was educated in Turkey as an electrical engineer, had a lot of, let's say, more technical jobs with high-level companies like Northern Telecom in Istanbul, but also with Alcatel. Then you moved to Belgium, which is quite a step, I would assume. Then you moved to the States because you got acquainted to the Western style of living. Qualcomm was the company you worked there for. And then you went back to Istanbul to work for Yapı Kredi Bank, if I pronounce it correctly, where you already had different positions in the Turkish domain for ICT service development. But that was all boring, I presume. So in 2002, you decided to co-found your own company with other people. And you are still the CTO and CIO of Mobilera, which is a company that is responsible, and you especially, for mobile service development. So that is quite an interesting career development, Zeynep. Yeah. So my question to you then would be, what would you say is the main difference between working for a boss or being your own boss?
Okay. I just want to explain how things happened indeed, because just I graduated from the university, I had a dream to have my own company, but it took me 11 years to have the courage and the opportunity to have my own company.
Right.
And
what held you back?
Indeed, first I said, okay, I have to know how a corporate works. And I want to experience what is going on over there. And by that experience, combining with my dreams, I want to have my own company.
Yeah. But then, if I may interrupt, your dream was stronger than your desire to learn how the corporates work, because many of us who have lived and worked there for many decades still don't know. So that's interesting. Yeah. But please continue.
I was just assuming the years that I have spent in my corporates, I mean, they're very strong. They had long history, and they had very big knowledge base, I can say. I experienced it as, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what makes me happy there, what makes me not okay, I can say. And then with all those experiences, I said, okay. And the moment I need an opportunity, that I had it because of the financial crisis. And then I just get the opportunity to have my own project, my own company in Turkey in 2002.
Yeah. And you are still happy, as we can judge.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, we'll get back also to the subject of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Okay, another entrepreneur, I would say, Okan Kara, but from a different perspective. Okan, ladies and gentlemen, is since July this year the chairman of the General Assembly of Eureka, which is a very responsible position. So congratulations in hindsight. That's very interesting. You have been with TÜBİTAK, the Turkish National Coordination Office for Scientific and Technological Research, which is quite good. You were educated as a science and technology policy specialist at the Middle East Technical University and also at the University College in London. So also, like Zainab, you have traveled to develop yourselves. And my question to you, and that is a very down-to-earth question, I know it, but I really would like to know the answer. So what can Khalil learn from best practices in Turkey?
Okay, thank you. So you want me to criticize the European Commission? Okay.
You can speak freely.
Okay, I try to do my best. Okay, Eureka is, for ones who haven't known yet, is this small flag. It is small, but it is equal size with the European Commission flag. Frankly speaking, I mean, when you turn back to early 2000s, when the European accession process for Turkey started, we have a very small, not integrated and not functioning well, an innovation and research system. Over the years, we really learned a lot from the European experiences, regulations in the Europe, programs of the European Commission, and we really benefit from it. One of the advantages of Turks are we can easily adapt every kind of environment. And over the years, we always suffer from the economic crisis. So to change, to adapt to new circumstances is one of the capabilities of the Turkish people and Turkish society. So we try to change our system and legislation. And over the years, I think that my country really performed good in this process. Of course, there are so many different benchmark statistics and works. But among these, I think one of the study that we put out most important is the competitiveness report of the World Economic Forum. When you look at the latest version of this report, you can easily see that Turkey, first time in its history, in the transition from efficiency-driven economy to innovation-driven economy. So it's an important challenge on the one hand and also important development on the other hand for my country. In the early days, when you look at the ICT, ICT serves in this efficiency phenomena, but now we are in the transition of passing and utilizing ICT for building new global innovations. Of course, the system is changing, but one of the needs for us today and near future is how to boost and benefit from our young generation to transform them into techno-entrepreneurs.
But Okan, if I may interrupt you,
Please.
From the length of your reply, we already can deduce that it is a politically correct answer. But if you are having, with your Turkish friends, just the other day, a nice cup of Turkish coffee, what is it you really say?
Now I'm passing this part. But now, when
What is your
look
really
at
basic feeling? What could we do better? What are you proud of in Turkey?
Sure. I'm coming to that part. When you look at the entrepreneurship, that's one of the bottlenecks of the European economy. And when we look at the legislation, programs, and I mean, I'm not talking about the individual countries, but Europe as a whole, you couldn't find a good way of implementing and copying at least programs, policies, and regulations. Then we have to look other side of the world, and we can easily see that there are other more beneficial and more applicable applications around the world. So I think one of the bottlenecks in Europe is to transform their young generation into techno-entrepreneurs. And the current programs could not fit well, including the European Commission programs, for this young generation. And I think that that's one of the fundamental bottlenecks that we will see, and it will really challenge the European economies in the near future.
This is interesting. You speak about the young generation. You are both representatives of this generation and even role models. What would you say are young people in Turkey longing for?
Actually, I mean, of course, for the young generation, there are not so much option in Turkey. Maybe this is one of the challenge, but also one of the opportunity in Turkey. Especially within my team, we have a very relatively young team. When we have a discussion with them, what they have seen and observed in their European counterparts, I think one of the challenges for the Western societies, since the expectation is somehow system will solve the problems on the behalf of the people, they can rest without involvement, putting their hands in the real job. So they expect that somehow the economies and the system and the government will solve the problems. But for Turkey, in order to be strength and be involved and successful, you have to do your own job at the end of the day. And the role of government only identify the bottlenecks and take out from your road. This is one of the differences comparing my country and the European economies.
Great. Is there anything you would like to add, Sain? I see a lot of body language from your side.
Yeah, I think we want to be heard.
You want to be heard?
Heard. I'm not heard.
Yes, sorry.
Yep. That's really what we really want to, because I believe we have lots of ideas and we have a kind of ability to do things in a different way.
Yes.
And we are really seeking the search to make it happen. So as Turkish a pioneer, I can say we need to be heard.
Yes, very good. Khalil, we have been working for, I think, almost 20 years already together. That's quite a time. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce the fifth person of our panel. That's Khalil Rouana. He's currently director of the Components and Systems division, if I may call it, within the DG Connect, which is the new name of the DG Info since, I think, July 1st, isn't it? Also the Commission wants to connect, which is great, and it reflects it in the wording. You report directly into Robert Madeline, who is quite a remarkable person. I met him a few times, and he, ladies and gentlemen, he is taking care of all our ICT elements. So he's a very important person for us, but he has a background in history. So he combines very interesting properties. And he also reflects, and Mr. Breton also mentioned that, He reflects that the social impact we need to have is important. So that just as an intermezzo, let's get back to you. You have been working with the Commission for, I think, 25 years or something like that, so 20 years. So we could call you a diehard, at least you survived, which is already a quite remarkable thing in Brussels. So you are an experienced person. You did projects for more than 20 years now. So what was for you, from a personal perspective, the most exciting project you ever did?
Good. Well, I mean, despite the fact that we might think that bureaucrats in Brussels live unhappy times, we do live exciting and happy times indeed. And there are many exciting experiences that I went through. I think what you mentioned, you started with this work with ISTAG on developing a vision, the ambient intelligence vision that we see today, achieved. We call it Internet of Things, we call it context-based computing or aware computing that Thierry Breton mentioned. That was a very exciting time. The scenarios, the follow-up of this were exciting times indeed. The launch of the ambient assisted living later initiative that were launched by my unit at that time was also an exciting time. Gathering the member states, see how we can pool resources, the launch of the jetties and all the work with the member states and industry to design the concept of the jetty and launch Artemis to start with were very good, exciting times as well. But I want to really focus on something a project, as you say, a research and development project that I thought was very exciting. And I want to share with you because I think it has some lessons, at least, that I've learned. It was a project that I monitored when I was still project officer on an area that is the area that we're discussing today. It was unpredictable and dependable computing systems. The project that gathered, I think, the world's best experts that were European in that time because they were the best known in the world. Gathered the best experts in Europe, the best centers, and developed fault-tolerant systems, developed fault prediction systems, developed also architectures, etc. What was interesting, exciting for that project is that I was called systematically, I think one by month, by industry. It was a purely academic project, by industry, by other academics who wanted to get in contact with the people working on this project. The attractivity that it got worldwide was exceptional. When in conferences and workshops that we used to organize with people from outside the project, it was clear there was an attractivity to the knowledge generated by this team. And it was not a surprise later that we got spin-off companies starting from that project, one of which I visited last week, TT Tech, still ongoing around what was called a smart system about time-triggered architectures at that time. What I want to say is that when you have knowledge, you attract investment, you attract talent. When you have a competitive edge, you can build a business. And that is important that we tend to forget from time to time. We think that around the hypes, around what we read in the newspapers, this is how we build businesses, this is how we build value. I think this community that is around here today is the community that should remind us systematically that you need to build knowledge, you build a competitive edge to develop businesses, to develop economic growth and jobs. And I'm very happy to be in my new job since July now, because I think that is the area where we have a lot to bring in terms of competitive edges to Europe. That project was, I think, a success and exciting because it developed not only methods, tools, research advances, it developed platforms that could be uptaken later and that had competitive features compared to any other platforms worldwide. And I think Europe today is lacking on these next generation platforms. I mean, I think we missed the core platforms of the current generation of ICT, I'm sorry to say it. We still produce a lot of the world value in ICT, I know, in Europe. It's not matching our size of the economy, but we still have a lot of assets. But I think on these core platforms around which values are produced, be it operating systems or be it devices or be it web platforms, I don't think we're so much present. The question for us now is, will we be present on the next generation of platforms that Thierry Breton mentioned before, that I know Artemis, ITEA are working on today? Will we be present there? Will we be present when the ambient intelligence vision would be fully realized? Will we own these platforms?
But it is a matter of choice, I would say.
I think it's a question of leadership.
Dreaming about visions is something we can do very easily, and
totally agree.
I can assure you that from a personal perspective.
Totally
But the devil is in the implementation, as very many people rightly say so. And yeah, but maybe also to go back to the let's say last century. So when we first started discussing the ambient intelligence work in 1999, I recall that you and also a few others from the Commission said that you envied at that point in time the United States, because they had their big DARPA projects, they had their defense industry driving all innovation. So 14 years later, what would you say? Do you still envy the US for their DARPA programs, or does Europe has been able of developing their own major programs, and ITEA and Artemis would be great examples, so just to help you a little, to match or possibly even leapfrog the US development? Indeed. What would you, from a benchmarking perspective, say there?
Indeed. Now, ITEA, Artemis, ENIAC, the Joint Technology Initiatives, AAL, were initiatives where we tried to build critical mass, pool resources in order to support an agenda that industry and the academic world have established together. They are part of our response to big initiatives that the US had launched in the ICT sector, driven mainly by Department of Energy, Department of Defense, in the 90s, in fact, and that I think had major impact on the success of the ICT industry at that time, generated a lot of innovation, and built this thickness of knowledge that you need to bring value. Now, I think that this is a sort of response, but I must say it's not sufficient.
Okay.
It's not sufficient. There are gaps in our innovation process, at least in the way we address it at the EU level. And these gaps were identified by industry. They told us about it. The support to entrepreneurship, as Håkan said, is something that we needed to look at more carefully. Also the gaps in bringing research results into the market and doing this last mile that we thought industry would do by its own. Industry is telling us sometime you need to help us build the value chains, organize ourselves around value chains across Europe so that we can benefit from the size of Europe. I think today we could see the difficulty of building complete value chains at national level.
Yeah. But Europe, Khalil, is often criticized for the fact that if you look at the big leading companies, that without any exception, they were there already 30 and even more years ago. Whereas if you look at the US and count their leading companies, some of the names we didn't know of 10 years ago. So what is happening?
True. Do you know how many companies are created in Europe every year? Just to say about the spirit of entrepreneurship. There is a good study done by our colleagues at the Enterprise that gives you an idea of how many companies are created in Europe, how many companies are created in the US, similar size economy.
New ones, you mean?
New ones.
Startups.
In fact, we create more companies in
Europe.
Europe.
We do better than in the US.
That's it.
Yeah.
We do create more companies.
So what happens in the meantime?
The problem is the growth of the companies.
Yes.
Problem the growth of the companies and on important technology sectors like ICT. Now, we have companies that have grown in our areas of strength. Areas of strength, i.e. sophisticated, complex systems engineering. We have companies that have grown that are not on the market. I mean, take equipment manufacturing for semiconductor. ASML is the world leader today. It has a turnover of 5.6 billion euros, so it's as big as Facebook. No, or at least on the dynamics, the growth potential that are huge. This is our area of strength, and we have companies that have grown there on software houses like Thierry Breton mentioned Atos. I don't know if you heard about Atos 20 years ago. It was not there. So we have developed these companies. They're not the companies you see in the newspapers, that is true, and they're not the companies that have grown to be world leaders and international global leaders in ICT. I think we create companies that have difficulties to grow. There are a key issue in that, which is the capitalizing of the size of our markets. We see companies grow at the size of the national economies worldwide. You know, in Germany, you have very good competitive companies at mid-size that work at German level. They have very good. They do some exports, but they're still size of the German economy. I think in France, I'm oversimplifying, but just to give an overview. The same thing across Europe. We have not yet been able to capitalize on the size of the European market to make our companies grow on that market at the outset.
That's PD.
It's a major issue. We were talking about the health sector in particular just before. It's a key one, but it applies across also all the continent. Now, this is one of the major things we're looking at in Digital Agenda, i.e. realizing the internal market for ICT. But it's, I must say, it's not an easy one.
Maybe a short comment before we go to the more general questions from Heinrich. You are in one of the leading companies in Europe. Your company has developed itself in a very interesting way, so joint undertakings with other leading companies in other European countries. So you should have experience what the difficulty is of operating in a European market with a global perspective. But you prevailed in a way, because you are still here.
But if you read the newspapers, you see that we are struggling every day, fighting with the national interventions, fighting especially with political influences on all levels.
All right.
Therefore, I fully agree, we are not benefiting and capitalizing from the size of the European market. We have a lot of very fragmented parallel approaches. And I'm very happy to say that programs like Artemis, like the common European approaches, bring us together. They force us to merge our efforts and also to have the opportunity to create common platforms. This national intervention, but also the national egoisms, is creating a kind of silos so that we are trying to prevent transfer of know-how, ideas to other domains. And now we have, for instance, inside Artemis, these centers of innovation excellence, where we are creating transnational efforts. And after a certain time of, let's say, getting known to each other, this is creating a momentum that is really leading to transnational, to common European efforts. And I'm very much counting on that to create business and to do something that is much more than just the sum of two national efforts.
Is there a message you would like to give to Erik Schutz?
I think Erik knows my message already. And
but then share it with the audience so that we can go to Erik and say that Heinrich is right.
No, but we work together, and it is an effort that is quite significant. It is not a self-sustaining, not a self-running effort. You need to bring people together to show to them the idea of working together will line up the entire food chain so that you bring together people from all elements.
Do we need new instruments? Do we need new ways of working?
We need to encourage people. I think we have quite good instruments available. And in the new approaches, we also encourage new approaches. For instance, going the last mile for me is very, very important. We had this desert zone, or however we call that, and with the new pilot projects. I think we are encouraging all the researchers, all the innovators to really bring the idea into the market. And therefore, that is something remarkably new. And I hope that we will really go this and bring the inventions that we have into the market application. For me, that is really essential. But one remark in comparing the new big companies in the United States with Europe. The European market is traditionally strong in, let's say, conventional technologies like machine building, like automotive market. We also did a very strong catch-up effort on the avionics part, and now we are in a very good position there worldwide. But Europe at the moment, due to also the fragmentation, due to language difficulties, due to legal constraints, is having a lot of difficulties in the IT market. This is communication, but also all over IT technologies. We have a few big companies who are very good in that market, but really creating an Apple or a Google or something like this is very, very difficult in the European market. Therefore, we need to work on the European unification, I think at least one more generation.
Do you, and maybe Francis can also reply, do you stimulate a lot of entrepreneurship from within your own organizations? Or do you want to encapsulate it and keep it close to the traditional business?
Okay, so in the Institute Mines Telecom, we create every year roughly 110 startups. So we are able today to create a lot of startups. Our real concern is the problem of growth. And it's the same, we have a club of very advanced SMEs in France. We have really a problem of growth. The problem of creating Google is very interesting because obviously American did it. And we say it's impossible to do that in France. But if you look at China, in Russia, they create the equivalent Google. Okay? Yeah. So the problem is there's two ways to create large company. One way is the willingness of states, and I think you know that, and it's a success. Or in the America, it's a problem of entrepreneurship. Okay? People you really is kind of spirit, people you want, and money is easy to come back and so forth. And I think we are in the middle, because we have stopped to create large company by state willingness, and we have not enough today, not enough entrepreneurships and experience of entrepreneurship to create large company like Google and so forth. So it's a real concern for us. We also have a problem of time constant, because if you want to develop SMEs, startups and SMEs, you have to be very fast between the idea of innovation and the way to go to the market. Yes. So it's one of our goals in the Institute Mines Telecom is to work on that in this ecosystem, in order to have a very close ecosystem between research teams, SMEs, startup and SMEs, and large company. Yeah. And I think it's probably the European way to progress. Yeah,
very good. So let's change the subject a little. So we are here today to communicate the message, the joint message of ITEA and Artemis that is laid out in an excellent report, I have to say. It's about a vision for the years to come. It extends until 2030. And I hope you all have had a chance to go through it. And my question to you would be, could you comment on it? But not from the perspective of, let's say, adhering to what is written there. So, because in a way, that's then, again, the politically correct answer. But I would like to challenge you again. What is it we should either emphasize or even add to what is in the current vision? Okan, to start with you.
So it might be good if I have my slide.
Okay, can we have Okan's slide? That is a few slides back, please.
Okay, great. So let me start by put my emphasis taking into account one of our newest strategy in Turkey. So what we believe is the success holds the ones that who utilize knowledge independent of where this knowledge is generated. So this is one of the fundamental things where we really believe it. It's true for my country's companies, also true for globally. That's why we try to reshape the Eureka network benefiting our chairmanship process and period, to put it in a real Eureka, in a real global platform for competitive innovation. So what I mean from this is, in the order of relationship, there are different stages. You can easily see on the screen. On the one hand, pure cooperation, on the other hand, pure competition. But we believe that the life is not binary, so there are some other options in the middle. But for the time being, there are not yet a suitable program or initiative to really serve for such a need of the companies. And we believe that in Eureka, clusters, and I always appreciate the fast moving of ITEA in this sense, clusters have the potential to fulfill the middle group, the competition relationship between among the companies. What we have seen in Europe for the time being is we compete in the process of application, then we cooperate during the implementation of projects. But what we need is the other way around as well. And I think the cluster really serve on this pace. The difference from US experience and the European experience is, for instance, in FP7, I'm also responsible for FP7 in my country, there is no competition during the implementation of the projects. What we have seen is the Commission selects just one project during the evaluation procedure for per topic, and then put all the money, emphasize, and the risk only just this project. So there are no competition on the way. This is one of the fundamental difference between the Europe and the rest of the world. So we try to put this important missing link within the Eureka system, and I think that ITEA and the rest of the clusters of the Eureka is one of the, probably will be the one of the pioneers in this process, but will be the right address for the companies.
Yeah. Very good. Let's position that a little bit as an answer from an instrumentation perspective. But Heinrich, for instance, mentioned that the social media was a development he didn't anticipate. But maybe there are early indicators. I think that some 10 years back, if we would have had a close look at society, that we would have seen early indicators of things that have to do with community building, for instance. And if you then would put an ICT cell around that and facilitate it, we would have something like Facebook, and we would have anticipated. Is there something that you see from the perspective of an early indicator that we are lagging, or that we should emphasize with respect to the current situation and development?
Mm-hmm. So my personal view on this process is that independent of what we believe it is positive or negative, it's a fact. So when you look at the, for instance, Turkish market, we are probably number 3 in the number of subscribers in the Facebook.
Yeah.
So independent of what the families think is positive or negative, it's a fact. So the question is how you can benefit from this fact and prevent the possible problems in the society. So this is our approach for the time being, and I think this is supposed to be the approach of the European community as a whole.
All right. Zainab, what is missing?
You know, when you're working with the research projects, with the big companies, small companies together, we work together, but when we have the, when we discuss about ideas, the big companies, they do it on their way, and we do it in our way, even in the same project. I mean, we integrate things, and we make projects, make it happen together, but I don't think that any of our ideas are taken with the industry companies as an added value to them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there is a big opportunity here in IT, I can say. I mean, that's my experience over here. It's like a greenhouse for us, for the SMEs to have their own ideas, own projects to grow up in. But on the other hand, I always wanted to put more input to the industry with the power of this coordination. And what happens at the end is always I take great benefit. That great benefit, I take it to home, but I don't leave something to the pool itself. That's the missing part for me.
Okay.
So,
yeah. But it sounds a little as if you are complaining, and I'm just using my wording,
yeah.
about not well being understood by the other side.
No, I mean, I don't say that. I don't want to say that they don't understand us, blah, blah. That's not a kind of complaint. It is, they're coming, I mean, the industry is so huge. They have their own mission. They have their own ideas when they come over here to make the research projects. So we are just like little voices over there. So I don't say that they don't understand us. They value it, but they have big vision. They have big aims, and
they have their problems.
We just disappear in their life. That's all. I mean, I don't complain. I had been there. I know what is going on there. But on the other hand, it's the missing point for the European projects. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, all right. Francie, can I challenge you to not let's say, have an answer in the direction of, let's say, structures, but something like Heinrich mentioned. Is there an ICT thing developing, which if you would look carefully into society, we see the early indicators, but yet it's not on the ITEA list and the Artemis list?
I think, frankly speaking, I think what thing is very important today, and it's why I choose the butterfly, is we are deep in the middle of a real metamorphosis of our society. Not an evolution, not a revolution, a real metamorphosis. And it's due to two things. The first one is globalization. We have education, science, technologies everywhere. The markets are global. Problem of climate, energy, and natural resources management are also global. And the usage and content become universal. So we have a very close and reactive organization of the human society. And with the booster of ICT technology, but not only ICT technology, but also booster of usage and digital abilities of a citizen, we are in a phase of instability. So we are changing. It's a real metamorphosis. The chenille is becoming a butterfly. Yeah. And it's going to change very deeply things. So in face of such a change, some people want to jump in it, some others are blind, and some others are running back because they are afraid by that. So we have really to cope with, we are in front of a dramatic change, and ICT technology is the core of that. Digital is the core of that. So we need to organize in order to answer to a short-term problem of markets and also to think of the future, okay, in the same time. So that's what we try to do. And regarding the instrument we use, I think we don't need a new instrument. I think researchers it's very difficult at the European level and more in France because in the last 2 years we have invented 5 to 6 or 7 new instruments, and we need more to simplify the existing instrument. Okay. But really simplifying, not adding a layer of simplification, but really simplify. Yeah. Yes. And I think there's very simple ideas to do
more money and easy access.
No, money is the money we can put on it. There's a crisis, okay, we can decide of more money.
So money is not the problem, you say?
I think our real problem is to have a good project, an efficient project, an efficient way to work together. That's the more critical point is the quality of project. Obviously, if we have more money, we can do a lot of more things. Yes. But to have not only good project, but to simplify things. For example, I'm sure that we need grants to funding project. Yeah. And a grant is very simple. You have not to compute the amount of man-months you are putting in each. You are not, there's no problem of cost statement, there's no problem of audit, and you can focus on the result. And I think it's really a critical point because the selection ratio is so high. So researchers need to write a lot of projects, and it's complicated to, and so we defocus of the results.
That's an interesting subject because you are addressing the issue of the red tape, as it is called. And already at the Commission there were a lot of, let's say, actions to reduce red tape. If you look at Artemis and IT, they often say that they have little red tape. That's one of their claims. Would you agree that is fair to claim?
I don't know. I say some, how to say that. I think we really need to change the way we think how to select project and to fund project. Definitively, because we are too bright and rational in Europe, and it's worse in France.
But that's an interesting issue. Maybe I can jump into that. And we often spend a lot of time, and therefore also a lot of money, in selecting the best project.
Yeah.
And then we forget about it. Another way of working could be
one project among 7.
Another way of working could be that we start more projects than we can fund integrally. And then have a mechanism of closely coaching, not assessing, coaching the project. And if something has a reason, if a project has a reason to continue, we continue it and give a new term to it. And if it is not, we stop it. And a fast fail is a success.
Sure.
So the only thing you can do wrong is to be too slow.
Okay.
That would be another instrument, I take it. Would you be in favor of that?
Yeah, sure, for sure. I think we need smaller project and interacting project.
Yes.
And be able to stop to stop or say, okay, after 1 year, we need to do more research on it, or we can stop it. I'm saying it's simpler, but we need dynamic.
The dynamics. Khalil, would that give you a headache?
Well, in fact, we have something in H2020 that is similar to that scheme, which is a scheme for SMEs in particular. So smaller entities, we're going for support to one entity and with different phases of feasibility phase. And then
but also the bigger projects.
Development
possibly
phases.
Even the FETs.
Yes. In fact, there was, I think, the comment by Okan that you picked up also, Emil, which is we tend to support one project to cover a particular challenge or particular technology. In fact, we do have competing projects. But there is the idea of starting projects and then stopping several of them and then stopping them is something that's worth looking at indeed. I think with this SME, stopping those who cannot perform, I think with the SME scheme we have something similar. We'll try it. But I would take what Francis said as well. The more we create instruments, the more we complicate things for people. And ideas could seem very interesting at the beginning. We've tried that in the past. You know, when you start accumulating the number of new ideas for the instruments, you complicate things. But it's certainly worth looking at. We tried that. I mean, when I came to the Commission, sorry to come back to that, we had a scheme like this in FET, in fact, as you were saying. And we had projects running for 1 year. And after 1 year, we followed them, we assessed them. And we stopped some of them. And I think we stopped 3 out of the 70 we launched. And I had 1 or 2 of them that I stopped when I was a project officer. It was painful. It was painful.
But maybe
painful.
that is the issue.
Yeah.
We perceive it as painful.
Yeah.
Others could say that through the insights that are generated, they would know now even better what to do.
Yeah.
So it's a way we look upon our activities that whenever we stop, it's a failure.
It's an interesting idea.
And therefore we don't dare to stop, so we continue on, and then complain that nothing is changing.
Yeah, well,
to put it bluntly.
No, I mean, we do stop projects, not in the 1 year or following a systematic, the systematic timetable for stopping a project, continuing it. But we do have projects terminated before their end because they do not perform. And we follow that very closely.
Would we recommend IT and Artemis to experiment with this type of projects, Heinrich?
The basic idea is very good, and this would also foster some more creativity.
Yes.
But the way we are working is so slow. After the first half year of working of a project, we should already, or we had to prepare the review to be able to have a result of the review at the end of the first year. Otherwise, you start at the end of the first year, and then you have half a year or 3/4 of a year delay. People are in standby, they are interrupting their work. So the bare feasibility is very, very difficult with this heavy infrastructure that we have.
But that's interesting. So what I take from your wording is that your people need half a year to report on their progress on an annual basis.
I'm not saying that my people are doing that, of course not. Yeah? But if we see the overall construction, when do we have to submit a report to the commissioners or to whoever is doing? We need to assemble the report. Yes. It has to be aligned.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense.
For me, a 1 year basis makes no sense. No.
Yes.
But
we also could reverse it.
Yeah.
That we have a lean and mean way of assessing or coaching. That was the reason why I use this other wording.
Yeah.
Because nowadays we do it on the basis of assessing. So smart people looking at others' projects. But we also could have people who really care about the progress of the project.
Yes. Yeah.
And want to make it a success themselves and not simply turn it into an exam.
If we could find a very good coach, that would definitely help. But we also need to find ways to have really efficient teams that are going for a project. Yeah. At the moment, if you are building a project proposal, you are trying to be lean, but then from each country, a lot of companies, a lot of universities are coming. So the intention is to start with perhaps 15 or 20 people. In the end, you are 75.
Yes.
And then you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And there are some countries that really try to keep it lean and efficient. And then from other countries, they are just pushing participation. Yes. And they don't look for the efficiency of that. Yeah. It is difficult to judge, I know. But with these heavy consortia, it is very, very difficult to achieve quick response. Okay. You can achieve very broad success because you have a lot of people and parties involved. Yeah,
That's true.
But this broad one is slowly.
Yep. From an entrepreneurial perspective, Zainab, what would you say to this issue?
I definitely agree that we should have some, faster exploitations, faster, we have to have deadlines. And we have to follow that deadlines. Shouldn't be yearly reporting, maybe can be half a year. And also we have to know that if we don't catch up the deadline, there is a potential that they can stop our project.
Yes.
We have that, stress in our projects also, I believe. Because we know in a year you'll make it, you report it well, but then the innovation doesn't come up.
Yep.
I totally agree.
Yeah, very good. I would like to use the last 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the action level of the audience, so that's you, ladies and gentlemen, to see whether or not we could have a debate at a broader level. So there are two ladies I know in the audience who would like to carry microphones and to come over to you. And I would like to invite you to participate. So, first, let's start to be a little bit close to the topic of the leadership. But as we continue, you can throw in any type of question that brings us happiness. So, who can I give the floor as the first questioner? It's difficult to look into the audience. Thank you very much. So Iris is at that side, ladies and gentlemen. Linda is at that side. Is it such so plain boring that none of the things we said so far raised any question with not a single person here? Or are you all working on your reports for the next half year? Thank you. There is a question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, in the past I used to work at Synap, so I have a question to Synap. Synap, you triggered me by saying that the large industries is not using enough the cooperation from learning from small companies. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that, how you then propose to change things in a way that it is more likely to happen.
You know, I mean, we have been working with big projects and we have been creating some products, innovations and that kind of things. And we try to accomplish something that can be commercialized in the project. As an SME, that was our aim because we have to earn money in the end of that research project. And we have tried a few times to introduce the things, the platforms, the commercial things that to the big companies as a starting point for them also to develop another platform on top of it. And I had been, volunteered and invited also to prepare presentations about what we have accomplished. But I take it on my part also, but we couldn't make it happen. And it didn't happen in all of the projects for sure. It just happened in a few projects, and we completed lots of them, I can say. But only in one of them or 2, 3 of them, we have been invited to present what we have accomplished to the people not in the research part of the company. And maybe at the end of the research project, we can identify what can be commercialized without looking it's a big company or it's a small company. And then we should make a commitment to introduce it to our companies. Then we can make them happen. I don't know, it's just come up when I'm talking.
Does that make sense to you? Are you when you go home, do you know what to do and what changed your life as a direct result of the answer of Synap to your question?
Okay, for me there is still a question because there are a lot of regulations saying that it should be pre-competitive, it should not be directly delivering products, and I see especially a difference between small companies and large companies, that large companies are often technology focused in these kind of projects, and the SMEs has to survive, so you need products at the end. Yeah. So maybe that's a difference, and I think it's very interesting for IT and Artemis to think about a way of a next step just after the project, how to commercialize it. Yeah. And I know that, for instance, EIT is looking into that area, so maybe we can have also strong cooperation with the idea of the EIT.
So you refer to dropping part of the legislation and making things, let's say, go the last mile, even more conveniently?
Khalil is worrying about that, I can imagine that, because it is very difficult to think about it. I think the discussion is already going on for years now.
Heinrich, you had a comment.
Yeah, I think the idea to look at the end of an R&D project, what kind of ideas may lead to a product is very good and really fascinating, and there should be a kind of container of ideas and results available. But as I'm working now since about more than 30 years in R&D, with also the obligation to bring products to the market, we also have to be aware, and many SMEs and especially many R&D institutions forget that to come to a demonstrator is costing you the money X, but to make a product to the market is costing you 5 times X. Who is going to spend that money? And this costs also a lot of time. And this is an effort that we really have to go through. That is a lecture I always give to my young engineers when they are entering into the company and they say, the company is so lazy. Yeah, they are right, Yeah? But on the other hand, if you are committed to guarantee the performance, if you are responsible for the safety of the system, and so on, you have to spend all this effort before you are bringing it to the market. And this is an effort that in many, many cases is underestimated. In IT, if it is a bare IT, if it is a bare, let's say, consumer-like product, it is easier. But as soon as it is affecting life of people, if it is going to transportation, mobility, it is not that easy. Therefore, perhaps we have to have different classes of products and product ideas.
What would that mean, Heinrich, for Europe in terms of having projects? So is the urge that you plead that organizations like Artemis and IT are more agile also to stimulate that last part? Should we even put some of the money into it?
I think the idea of keeping a kind of container with results, this is something that we already discussed several times. So to have somewhere a collection of available results, make it available to other parallel projects, and then perhaps go with different speeds for different domains. So if you are going for communication technology, you may go very fast. If you are going to transportation or something like this, this will take much more effort to really implement that.
Yeah, Okan, you would like to add to that?
When we first take the responsibility of the Eureka network, which is now contains 42 members, we approach by the venture capital sector and business angels, and they criticize and say that several years ago we tried to look at your portfolio, try to understand what is the outcome, and the result is, the answer is, no, you can't because it's forbidden. So what we try to change in the system within our chairmanship period is, you know, in the life cycle of an innovation, you have two kinds of risks, as you mentioned, the technological risk, which is generally covered by the governmental institutions through several instruments. ETAs and Artemis is one of the such instruments, and then the market risk. So what we try to do is, in a very early stage of the projects, to align two kinds of capitals that address the technological risk and the market risk through business angels and the venture capital ecosystem to be open.
Yeah. That's interesting. Let's check that with the audience. That's a good point. I'll get back to you for the second point. Is that okay with you? Okay.
Please.
How many project leaders are there in the audience? That's quite a few. Whom of you know to whom you are going to transfer the result of your project? One left, two left, three. That's less than 10%, ladies and gentlemen. That's unbelievable. That no one is longing for the results of your project apart from your project team, possibly. What is the reason? Go ahead. Linda, can you give the gentleman the microphone, because we are really eagerly longing to hear the answer. So pay attention, Fopke. This is where your money is flowing.
Actually,
it's on.
Rather than giving an answer, I would like to suggest a question that may include the answer.
It's all political people in the audience. All right, go ahead.
Now, we frequently complain, quote unquote, complain about two things. The first one is the high transaction costs of implementing these projects. You know, we are talking about reporting and all those kinds of things. And also the other thing which we are complaining is the low exploitation of the project results. Mm-hmm. Now, these two things are mentioned separately. I'm wondering if there is a link between them.
Yeah, there should be a link. It's hardly bearable that you start a project without knowing to whom you like, or at least want to transfer. So if you do the project and then hope that someone will knock on your door and say, please give me your results, that's almost in vain. So I think you are perfectly right. So not stating it as a question, stating it as an obligation, you should combine those two.
So then, I mean, if there is a link between those two, the answers of those questions, then maybe we should look at how we can reduce the transaction costs of the project.
That's an interesting question.
And if we can achieve that, then maybe
Yeah.
it allows us to improve the exploitation.
That's a very good point. And we have a person who is in a position to answer this. Heinz, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just want to compliment the answer given by our Turkish colleague. He is the project leader of a project called Reconserve. It's about maritime surveillance. And there is one customer in this project, the Turkish Coast Guard Command. So just, let's say, your project has a customer from the very beginning. And the requirements are defined by the Turkish Coast Guard demand, and is exactly developed according to their, let's say, to their needs. So in some projects, we have the customer already involved from the beginning.
That is a good point. But the gentleman also brought up the fact that in his situation, there are considerable costs related to this transfer. And I think that was also what Heinrich was referring to. So apparently there is a barrier. And if you recognize it, you could remove it. Maybe we turn to the lady. There was a lady, Linda, in the first floor. Yeah, she's raising her hand. The lady, ladies and gentlemen, she raised her hand as the first, as an answer to my question, who knows where to transfer? So apparently in your case, the person or the company is known, and maybe you could shed some light on the question or on the issue, how you organize that in your project. Go ahead, please.
In fact, the answer was given already by Heinz. My name is Ina Schieferdecker. I'm heading the Diamonds ITER project, and we do have 6 case studies together with the case study vendors, which constitute by themselves our target customers, and we work towards disseminate and exploit the solutions to them and address, for example, the EIT in Berlin to come up with supporting instruments. Mm-hmm. The whole project is on security test methodologies for ICT in different domains. So it is out of the project and then getting into other partnerships like EIT or ETSI, standardization bodies,
but
or
who,
other environments.
if I may interrupt you, who is your end user? To whom do you transfer?
We do transfer our solution to the vendors of ICT solutions in
directly.
banking and telecommunication.
And there are no barriers to it?
No.
Barriers.
Sure there are. All these questions are valid.
Yes, all right. But in your case, you manage.
These, I think, cannot be sorted out by a project itself. So we do have to understand that we do prototypical developments. We show how we come up with a proof of concepts. We come up with pre-products. But at a certain point in time, the industry has to take over. Or we do spin off own companies. For example, I'm also in Fraunhofer, and we have a pretty well-established strategies to spin off companies.
We know that indeed. Very good.
Yeah, if the industry doesn't take over.
Yeah. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just got the sign that we have to stop this entertaining activity, which I gladly do because I think that we have addressed on a number of very interesting topics. So just to wind up, I think that we touched upon a few things, and I would like to, let's say, aggregate as a message that my team and I came to the conclusion that speed is important, fast execution of projects, faster than we do, and that is not a disclaimer, it's a compliment because both in Artemis and ITER projects are well executed, but the attention to project management can be raised, especially with respect to speed, but also with respect to dynamics. We also touched upon this issue of, let's say, coaching projects, maybe stopping more than we do now. That might be an interesting thing. We also didn't touch upon a few things, especially the, let's say, the ICT things that we see early indicators of. I would like to mention there the quantified self, for instance. The convergence between brain cognition and ICT is something we didn't address at all whereas you could say from a well-being perspective, and even with happiness as an ultimate goal, this element of having ICT more directly coupled into behavior of people and cognitive processes is something we see early indicators of and is going to contribute to the next wave. I don't know to what extent, but it is there. Maybe finally, we spoke about leadership. My friends at Fraunhofer, they gave me a few interesting quotes. And you know, there is a very simple world. It's about nice cars and speedy things. And they always say, the leader has space enough. As you can see from this start of a Grand Prix, you know, the driver who gets as first through the first corner, he doesn't have any issue with all the others who would try or like to take over. And then this is already a very old one. It's from Sterling Moss. And then there was also one from Niki Lauda, and he always said, from the perspective of leadership, we always speak about control, but his claim is, if you have everything under control, you are not driving fast enough. And that is my final statement. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you team for being here with me. Thank you for listening to us for more than an hour. And have a nice IT Artemis Co-Summit, ladies and gentlemen.